Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth virtual table of the Lampstand. And welcome my guests, Kelli Theis and Jenne Bergstrom. Kelli is a good friend and fellow Portuguese Padengo owner and great cook. And Jenne is my niece and a double-barreled food blogger and a cookbook author. So the video I just put up was Zahav braised lamb shoulder in a pomegranate braising liquid with chickpeas. And I particularly asked Kelli and Jenne to join me in cooking this one because I knew they were crazy enough to cook something that took 3 days to cook. And I wasn't sure anyone else would be willing to do that. But they're also both Kelli, I think, especially avid cooks of Mediterranean cooking and Israeli cooking, and Jenne is joining that bandwagon. And this recipe that I did the cooking video for was based on the signature dish of the Zahav restaurant in Philadelphia, which is reputed to be the best Israeli restaurant in the country. And the author is Miko Osada. I encouraged both Jenne and Kelli to take it in whatever direction they wanted. Because I cooked so much lamb shoulder last weekend, I've been doing various leftovers all week, and I'll talk about that. And I finally got to the very last of my pomegranate braising liquid, and that's what's left of the lamb shoulder from last week, and I'll show you what I did with that. But first, Jenne, why don't you tell us what you did?
All right. So I did a actually pretty straight ahead version of the lamb shoulder as was in the book. Let me see if I can show some pictures.
Right.
There's this. Here we go. And
beautiful.
Big. Let's see, full screen. All right. Does that show up?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the lamb shoulder. I actually got the cookbook out of the library because I'm a librarian. I work in the library. And in the cookbook, it did say that you could. There's many steps to this recipe. The first of which is to brine it overnight, which was fairly straightforward. Luckily, I had been clearing out my refrigerator for the weeks ahead of this. My refrigerator is always just full of many like little jars of things and extra leftovers and, leeks shoved into the side and everything. So I made some space. And then the next step is after you've brined it overnight, you're supposed to sort of sear it in the oven or on the stove, I believe, but it said also you could do it on the grill. So I did it on my grill outside and got it nice and kind of charred in various places. And then you cook it for 5 hours. So at first I was a little nervous about how I was going to deal with that with my work schedule. But it turned out I got my second vaccine on Tuesday. And so I decided to take Wednesday off in case I had any symptoms from that, which I luckily really did not. I was a little tired, but not too bad. But luckily I had a whole day free to cook lamb for 5 hours in my oven. So that's what I did. And yeah, it turned out really beautiful. And then of course you leave it another day. And then the next day you put it back in the oven uncovered and let it get all crisped up and baste it with the pomegranate molasses juices that it's been cooking in. And then these chickpeas have been kind of cooking in there alongside it the whole time. In my case, the chickpeas did not turn out super great. I don't know. The recipe was like, they're going to be the most amazing creamy chickpeas you've ever had. And they were fine. I didn't think they were that exciting, to be honest.
How did they retain that color? Mine turned purple from the pomegranate.
I don't know. I mean, you used like twice the amount of pomegranate as it said in the recipe, and I just used the stated amount because I thought
Okay.
it tasted pretty strong already. So maybe that's why. But even so, yeah, they were, I don't know, they were still a little hard and kind of had a weirdly sour taste. I don't know. They weren't unpleasant, but I wasn't like, these are amazing.
One of the
So,
things that Michael Solomon says is that if your chickpeas that you're starting with are old, they're not gonna
mm,
get soft no matter how long you cook them.
yeah, that could be, I don't know. I mean, I bought fresh ones, but
Mm.
who knows? Let's see, how do I get to the next page? Oh, there we go. So this is everything I served it with. The Schug that you suggested that we make, which I had never had before, and I was teasing Kip about this the other day, that he always posts on Facebook, and like no matter what else he is eating, he always has Schug with it, and I was like, this is kind of getting a little bit of overkill, but ever since I've made this, I think I've put it on like everything that I've eaten, so it is
It's awesomely
incredibly delicious.
good. It's awesomely good, but
Yeah.
it's awesomely hot.
Yes, and yeah, the recipe in the book uses serrano peppers, and I used jalapenos like you suggested. And I feel like anymore these days, jalapenos are not super spicy. Like I think it seems like they've been, I don't know, like breeding them to be less spicy. So this one just has like a subtle heat. It's not super overwhelming, so it's actually really nice. And it's garlicky and has lots of herbs. It's just really delicious. Goes with everything. So I had that, and I had some feta cheese. I went to the Middle Eastern market, and they have probably at least 8 different kinds of feta at their cheese counter. So I asked the lady which one she thought was the best, and she said to get the French feta. So that's what I had here, and it is actually really good. It's like not quite as tart and tangy as usual. It has kind of a more like a richer flavor, and it's a little milder, so you can just kind of eat more of it with things, which is great. And then this was just some hummus that I bought. I did not make my own hummus. And then let's see.
Is
And then
that
I made 2
that
side
pita that
dishes.
you made?
Sorry?
Is that pita that you made?
Oh no, the pita, or it's actually not pita, it's I don't know, some giant bread, like it's like 2 feet long, that they have at the Middle Eastern market. This is it's called North Park Produce. There's a couple locations in San Diego, and they have really amazing breads there that they just make fresh. So much better than anything I could have done. So I bought that. And then these are 2 side dishes that I've made that are also from the Zahav cookbook. The salad looking one is spicy fennel slaw, which is super easy. You just slice the fennel on the mandolin and add some of the Schug that you've already made, and a bunch of cilantro and a little olive oil. And I added a little lemon juice also, which was not in the recipe, but you know, can't hold me back. Always have to do something different, right? And then the other one here is eggplant. It's called twice cooked eggplant, and it's so you like really char the eggplant in a skillet, and then you cook onions and red peppers, and you kind of mix it all together, and then you could put kind of a lot of sherry vinegar in with it and kind of cook it all down together, and then add parsley at the end and lemon juice. So also super good, and these all kind of went nicely together. Lots of different ripe flavors. So that was the direction I went.
Great. Okay, Kelly, tell us about what you did.
So here's Kelly's.
Well, I certainly kept with lamb and Middle Eastern. It's not, my presentation isn't as pretty as Jenny's, but I went with a different chef. Alon Shaya is a James Beard Award winner, and this was actually the dish that was served when he received his award, like recognition of Best New Chef of the Year. He's got 2 restaurants, one in New Orleans where he and his wife live, and one here in Denver. The one in New Orleans is called Saba, which is grandfather in Hebrew, and the one here in Denver is Safta, which is grandmother. And it's cute and it's delicious. It's set up like your grandmother's kitchen, so like pink little rose things and cute little painted chairs and tables, and it's super nice. Probably one of the best restaurants in Denver, if not the best right now. And that's pre-pandemic. I don't know kind of what's left, sadly. But I have made the Zahav hummus forever, and it's delicious. But I went with Alon's version here that went with this dish. So this is hummus with lamb ragu and harissa. So I'll start with the hummus. He did it a little differently. So after the beans soaked overnight, you drain them, sprinkle them with more baking soda, and then you roast them in a roasting pan for 15 minutes in a 450-degree oven. And what I thought at the time was absolutely true. What it tasted like, it's a little roasted. You know, it has that flavor, which isn't necessarily what you want for, you know, pita and hummus, but it stands up nicely to the lamb because the lamb's got a lot going on. It is seared. It's ground lamb, seared in very, very smoking hot duck fat. Ooh. And you put it in your Dutch oven and you just leave it. And that lets this fond develop, and then you kind of break it up and it cooks forever. But then added to it is some tomato puree and lots of spices and deliciousness. And then when I tasted it, I wanted it a little bit more. So I actually had made my own harissa the day before. And so I actually added some to it rather than just leaving it as a condiment. I did make my own pita bread. Not real happy with this recipe. Typically when I make yeasted products, I let the yeast develop separately and then I mix it into the flour. And this time the recipe used an instant yeast, which I like the idea of. And they just didn't puff up as nicely as they usually do. So I put some olive oil on the pita and then sprinkled it with za'atar in Arabic, za'atar in Hebrew. And I actually have both versions here, which I thought was kind of funny. I forgot that I had the Arabic one, or the Arab one I got at a local Arab store here. And then the one that's from Israel, I got from a house guest last year. So that was kind of fun. But the harissa was really fun to make. Your Schug is the green version of, something from North Africa, a very hot condiment. And harissa is, Northern African as well, made with red peppers, hot peppers. And it's, like the Schug, you can just use it on anything. What was fun making this, and the recipe that I found was great because, like Israeli cuisine is a melding of all sorts of, countries and people, and we can talk about the history and how food developed in a little bit if interested. But this recipe called for dried New Mexico chilies and dried arbol chilies, which is also from New Mexico. And I have those in my cabinet at all times. So, something that's available readily in my part of the world, I use to make a Middle Eastern condiment. And I thought that was a lot of fun.
Hey, tell us, well, first of all, explain to people what za'atar is, what's in it.
Yeah, so za'atar is mostly sumac leaves, but it also has thyme and sesame seeds, and it's very fine. I don't know if you could see it, but it's finely ground, and you can literally just sprinkle it on anything, and it's delicious. And then here's the Israeli packet. You can see it was hand written at the Schug, most likely, and it's delicious. And you can actually, typically in the Middle East, you'll see a paste made out of it. So you put as much in a bowl and then just mix it with a little olive oil until it literally is like a paste, and then you can smear that on your pita, or again use it as a condiment on food.
Yeah, what I like to do with it is butternut squash that you roast with red onion, and then when it's done, you put the za'atar and tahini on it.
Ooh,
lovely. Yeah,
Awesomely good. That's from the Jerusalem cookbook, which is a great
right. Well,
Okay.
and something else, speaking of tahini, something else that was different about this hummus is that typically when I make it, well, first of all, I learned that I cannot stand American hummus. And I felt very unpopular in the 70s when it was all the rage and like all my vegetarian friends were eating this stuff and I couldn't stand it. And I figured out why. I figured it out after I went to Israel. Israeli hummus is like half chickpeas mashed up and half prepared tahini. Prepared, it's not just out of the jar or can or however you're buying it. It's mixed with lemon juice, garlic, and I don't like hot raw garlic, so I soak the garlic cloves in lemon juice and then add just the juice to the tahini and then ice water. And you make it this nice consistency that I typically have some in the fridge all the time. I use it for salad dressing, but you know, the prepared tahini is what you put with the chickpeas and mash it up. Well, this recipe, not only do you roast the chickpeas, but you put your 8 cloves of garlic in the chickpeas while they're boiling on the stove. And so again, it's a mellow garlic flavor that stands very nicely with the roasted chickpeas. And that was just another technique that I had never done. And so I was excited to try something new.
Yeah, I'm going to soak some chickpeas tonight and make some hummus tomorrow. The Zahav cookbook, the first 50 pages of it are tahini and hummus.
Right.
It's hard to explain how you could go that deep, but he does. And it took me a year actually to get beyond the first 50 pages because the tahini and the hummus and all the different things you can do with them were so good. I just never went beyond that. And it turns out it's actually a really good cookbook, the rest of it. But it's if you want to have an adventure in hummus making, I highly recommend Zahav as an intro to it.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't looked at so much of the rest of the book, but
put my
it's a
pictures up.
cookbook.
I'll talk about what I did.
Yeah.
So last weekend I made I did the cooking video on the braised lamb shoulder, and you know, when you're doing a cooking video, especially one that you're doing things that take 3 days, you're not going to do 3 days of shooting, right? So I had gotten one to the 3rd day, and then I was working with one. Yeah, you can put that one up. And I was working with the one that was on the 2nd day for most of the shooting. But anyway, one was 4 pounds, one was 7 pounds. So you can imagine how much leftover lamb shoulder I had, right? So over the last week, I've made a Indian lamb saag, you know, spinach curry with the lamb. Excellent. I made braised lamb shoulder tacos with a little bit of jack cheese, a lime, cilantro, avocado crema, the braised lamb, and then a little bit of the Schug. I think that was the standout. And I made harissa, and which is a Moroccan soup, and they use it to break the fast on Ramadan, and we're in Ramadan now, so I thought it was particularly appropriate. And it uses lamb and chickpeas, so I used basically all the leftover lamb and chickpeas. But then I had I still had this pomegranate infused lamb broth braising liquid that was so good.
I'm curious what you're gonna do with it, because I kept mine too.
Yeah, so this is what I did. I reduced it and I used it as almost like a gravy on the bottom of and over the top of some rib chops, which I grilled.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, and I put the pumpkin seeds on as a garnish, and then those are there's chives and little pea sprouts just to kind of decorate it. So that's what I did today. And then to go with it, next picture, I did this salad. I was at a the end of a winter farm market in Provence yesterday, and they had some great greens that were obviously grown in a greenhouse, and then some nasturtiums and radishes, all from various farms in Rhode Island. And I did it with some great Parmesan that I got from an Italian deli there. So anyway, that's the salad to go with it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. So Kelly, you were offering to do a little bit of the history of Israeli
Yeah.
food and cooking, and how, like the US, in a way, it's a melting pot of a lot of different places. So why don't
Yeah.
you take us there?
I can do that. Yeah, modern, I mean, you have to remember that we think of, Israel as this ancient country, which it certainly is, with lots of old stuff. But the country itself just celebrated its 73rd birthday last week. So it is still very, very young. I was on, Kip, another virtual trip to Israel this last week, and both the chair from JNF as well as the tour guide who's in Israel both talked a lot about their fathers. One, if you've seen the Sacha Baron Cohen movie, The Spy, the tour guide's father was the head of the agency that was in charge of all of these spies who were sent to Arabic-speaking countries. It was fascinating. And then the other guy's dad was a pilot mechanic. And France and the United States were sending old World War II planes over to Israel early on in 47. And so these guys, the pilots and the mechanics, didn't have any books. They had no manuals. And so they just had to kind of figure it out. So we are now losing that generation of Israelis who actually built the country. So you've got these people who came in, both of these men that I just referenced were from Eastern Europe. Both of them were victims of the Holocaust, in that they were in concentration camps, lost most of their family, and were shipped to then Palestine, and landed in a resettlement camp that's now in Gaza. I mean, so if you kind of think of what was going on in the area in the mid 40s, it was definitely an Aryan transition. So after Israel declared its independence in May of 47, the war broke out. Israel was attacked by all of its Arab neighbors. And even though they won, what ended up happening is, after the war in 48, all the Jews from Morocco, Iraq, Iran, etc., were all kicked out, and they ended up in Israel. So when that happened, think about it. You've got the Sabras, so the people the Jews that have been in Israel for all time. You've got Arab-speaking peoples, either Palestinian or all sorts of different indigenous people there as well, and all of their food. Druze, Bedouins, they're there with their food. And then you have this influx in the late 40s or mid to late 40s of Eastern Europeans who brought their food with them, which is completely different than we see from the region. And then in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, 52, you've got Iraqi Jews and Moroccans and et cetera, coming with their foods. So it a very small, in the country that's the size of New Jersey, you've got basically hundreds of different types of cuisine that have come together. Early on, and by early on, I mean this period of growth in the 50s and 60s, this was not a food capital. Americans did not go to Israel to eat food like Jews and non-Jews alike do today. In fact, one of my favorite stories is, it's sold in delicate, specialty stores, Israeli couscous, right? That's a big thing. And I paid nearly $10 for the bucket of Israeli couscous that I'm looking at over there. Israeli couscous was manufactured in the 50s by scientists in a lab because they didn't have rice. They couldn't import rice from their neighbors because the neighbors weren't going to do business with them. And so Ben-Gurion charged the universities to make something for the people, to feed the people. And so what they came up with is what's known as very fancy Israeli couscous today. But in Israel, it's still called Ben-Gurion's rice. And I've known that story for a long time. And the last time we had a house full of Israelis, young, people my children's age, young people, young adults, I referred to this dish that I was making, which is a lamb dish, seared lamb chops with a Provençal tomato olivey sort of side, and then Israeli couscous. But when I was telling them what it was, I said, and Ben Gurion's rice, and I got high fives from all of the guys. They thought that was so great that I knew what that was. So fast forward, and the Israelis, figured out how to grow tomatoes, cucumbers, grapes, etc., in the desert by using drip irrigation, which we, of course, now use all over. But they created the cherry tomato because it was small and it didn't need as much water. That with water conservation, they grow, I've been to some of the grow sites where they grow vegetables vertically, so they don't take up as much ground, and then they just water right at the roots. So it took a good 50 years from the period of austerity where people were scraping together whatever it was that they could to eat, to breads or specialties. There's not a lot of meat. Actually, Israel is now a vegan capital of the world. They have more vegan restaurants per capita than any city in the world. And whenever I go, I love it because it's my chance to eat vegetarian and delicious vegetarian food that I have a hard time finding here. Lamb is actually eaten. It doesn't take much water or grain to produce the lamb. So we're killing the lamb when it's a baby. Cattle is not a big stock there. They have dairy cattle, but it's not a meat. They import most of their meat, which a lot of folks I don't think realize. They don't have the United States West for all of the beef that we grow here. But yeah, so they have fresh food, delicious, homegrown. It's all local, with rare exception. And so what you have today, not only is there, this infusion of spirit and energy, especially with the young people, the up and coming adults and their neighbors and their friends, they bring all their grandparents' cuisines together, and the product along with fresh food is delightful, and it's very, very special.
I think when I first started cooking obsessively, I divide life into two categories: an excuse to cook and a distraction from cooking. So, it's just everything. It's my passion. But when I first started, I was mainly using the Jerusalem Cookbook, which is by two guys that grew up in Jerusalem, who didn't know each other then, but are now business partners in London. One Jewish, one Palestinian, Yotam Adelengi and Sami Mamimi. And the majority of the dishes in that book are vegetarian, and they're just awesomely good. I would go a week, cooking from that cookbook and realize I hadn't eaten any meat, but it was only like after a week that I don't think I ate any meat this week. I mean, the vegetarian dishes were so good, you didn't miss the meat.
Right. Right.
So, Jenny,
so this particular, I'll just add real quickly. I packed up all the leftovers, and these are going to my son and his roommate this evening. They're very excited. And I'm going to suggest that actually they cook up some Israeli couscous to serve. The original recipe was meant as an hors d'oeuvre. So add a little Israeli couscous to add some oomph to it. And then an Israeli salad, which is simply just chopped Roma tomatoes, chopped cucumber to little bitty bits. Some people add onion, I don't. Olive oil, a little salt, and lemon juice, and you're done.
Which is fattoush, right?
Yeah.
Fattoush is the one with the pita chips, right?
What I've heard is that if a Palestinian or an Israeli goes without fattoush for more than one day, they get fattoush withdrawal. And during the summer, that's the way I feel. You got to have it, You basically have to eat it the day you make it. It doesn't really.
Oh, you have to. It doesn't say. Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't go well. Hey, so Jenny, you're now in proud possession of a whole lot of leftover braised lamb. So what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I mean, it's not as much as you might think. I mean, I did have a friend over for dinner to help me eat the first part of it. But yeah, I like your tacos idea. I have yeah, there's a like local place here that makes tortillas, super great. Maybe some crema oaxaqueña, which is kind of like it's like sour cream, but like 10 times better. I'm not quite sure what they do to it, but it's amazing. It's like the Oaxacan style of sour cream.
Mm.
And yeah, maybe I would put some of the eggplant sort of relish left over from the meal in there too. I think it'll be great with the Schug and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
When
gonna bring some up to my mom when I go visit her today.
I made my crema, I used sour cream, but also some buttermilk
Mm,
with lime and cilantro. And I actually put half an avocado in too, which is really
yeah.
cool.
Good.
Yeah, I would put some avocado on, but I ate the whole avocado yesterday and I don't have another one, sadly.
Well, you know,
California fail.
are there, is there Israeli cuisine available in San Diego? Is that one of the ethnicities that
That's a good question. I don't think there's specifically Israeli. There's a lot of Middle Eastern cuisine in San Diego. There's one particularly excellent Lebanese restaurant called Al Faron. And then in El Cajon, which is kind of to the east of San Diego, it's kind of one of the larger cities in the county. The county of San Diego is the same size as the state of Connecticut. So there's a lot of places and a lot of stuff going on. But in El Cajon, there's a large community of Iraqi refugees that came over since like the late 90s, I think. So there's quite a lot of Iraqi restaurants over there, which is kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I don't know. I can't think of specifically an Israeli restaurant in San Diego to ask around. Actually, my friend and I, who she and I wrote our cookbook together and we do our blogs together. And we have a new blog project where we're trying to eat at a different country in like a different world cuisine restaurant in San Diego in alphabetical order. So like, and we're doing it each month. So like for A, we had I think it was a Afghani restaurant. And then for B, we had a Brazilian one and a Belgian one and so on. So maybe by the time we get to I can find out if there's an Israeli restaurant as well.
There you go.
Ian? You didn't do Armenian with A?
I don't think, was it Armenian? I actually cannot remember because that's the one that she went to. I did not go to it myself.
That was last month's virtual table was Armenian braised lamb shanks. That was great.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we
Kelli,
found a little Belgian French fry stand at one of the farmers markets, which was amazing. Like they make the best French fries in the world. I mean, they invented them. They know how.
so when you get to X, you can use that Chinese restaurant that's named after that province in China, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a couple different restaurants from Xi'an. I think that's how you pronounce it, more or less. One of which is called Shanxi Magic Kitchen, which is just a fun name. So.
Yeah, there's kind of a crazy lamb recipe, and on your recommendation, I bought that cookbook.
Oh, cool.
So it doesn't take much arm twisting to get me to buy another cookbook, but
no, right?
There's
just so many
recipe in there.
Gorgeous cookbooks lately. There's this really cool one that I checked out from the library recently about, I think it's just called Oaxaca, and it's a restaurant in Los Angeles that they're the people that wrote the cookbook, but it looks amazing and I'm excited to try out some of the stuff from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you have a favorite Israeli restaurant right in Denver, right, Kelli?
Yeah, it's Safta, which is, again, it's a Lon Shaya's restaurant. And he was born in Israel and actually grew up in Philadelphia. So I think it's funny that both he and Zahav are, Philadelphia area. And he's got the two restaurants, and then he's opening a third in one of the fancy hotels in New Orleans, Four Seasons, maybe, don't want to misspeak, this June, or, coming up. And it's going to be a Southern concept. So since the pandemic, he's been offering virtual cooking classes, and it's fun because he's been doing Israeli stuff. So we had a hummus class, he had dips and spreads. His baba ganoush is to die for, and that's definitely in my rotation going forward. Tzatziki was great, but he also threw in gumbo, which the recipe said it made servings for 6. Well, I don't know who these 6 people are, but they must be very hungry Cajuns because there was this huge pile. And he also did jambalaya, which was absolutely delicious. So he's been fun. His biscuit class on the first day of Passover was a little controversial for some of us, but oh well, had to take it anyway. So yeah, he's great.
Colorado, so I'll have to go check that place out next time I go visit.
Yeah, for sure. It's right downtown, kind of in a weirdly new area of town. You know, Denver's seen such a ridiculous growth in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's in an area, for those of us who grew up here, you're like, Brighton Boulevard, I'm not going there, but it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely somebody to pay attention to for sure.
Cool.
Do you know of other Israeli restaurants around the country besides that one, those two, and Zahav?
You know what? Again, pre-pandemic, there were a couple in New York that were quite good. Some of them, and I'm not going to know the names off the top of my head, but some of them were concepts that were restaurants in Tel Aviv that they opened Manhattan restaurants. I know at least 2 of them have closed, which is tragic. There's also a dessert restaurant. It's Israeli desserts that is, again, it started in Israel and then New York. My favorite coffee shop in the entire world is Aroma, which is so funny to see the word aroma spelled in Hebrew, but it spells out aroma. And there's one of those, at least one in New Jersey. And it's just delicious coffee. And it's so much more than a Starbucks, where, you know, Starbucks has its food offerings that have gotten better over the years, but we're talking Israeli style, like full on salad, full on huge sandwiches, full on like delicious desserts with your coffee. If you order an iced coffee, which, you know, when it's 100 degrees outside and in the Israeli desert, iced coffee sounds really good. It's not what you think. It's more like a what's the Starbucks, like a frappe. So it's blended with sugar and cream, and it's absolutely delicious and very refreshing. So at least there's at least one of those in New Jersey.
So Jenny, Kelly and I separately, but it was her idea and she's done it twice, went on this virtual food tour of Israel.
Oh, cool.
And the way it worked, it was every night, I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right?
Yeah.
So every night from like, I don't know, for a couple hours at least, we went on this virtual food tour of Israel. It was really cool.
Oh, wow.
It's on different regions. You've gone to 2 different ones now, right, Kelly?
I've gone to 2 of the food ones. I've chaired this last one that we did last week. And then I was on 2 different just regular tours of Israel. And they also do a water tour, which is fascinating. And they do a fashion and arts tour. But food, I particularly liked because I'm writing down, I'm such a good student, nerd that I am. I was writing down and looking up like the names of foods and the dishes, and then looking for recipes. So I've got a whole stack of things I need to go through. Also, they sent us this last tour, the list of restaurants that we visited. And so I'm excited for my next trip back. So yeah, I've now been virtually to Israel as many times as I've actually been. So I've doubled my trips to Israel just during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a really fun concept. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, it was really nice. The Jewish National Fund, JNF, did this. They didn't make any money off of this, but all the money that we paid, it's $50 a pane, so it's, you know, not that much. All of the money went directly to the tour guides, because there's no tourism in Israel right now, and so this industry was hurting. And I thought it was a very creative way to keep these guys working. Now, granted, it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when we're talking to them, but it's a great way to keep that part of the economy going a little bit.
Now, both of you, as it turns out, come from 2 of the top 5 sheep states in the country, California. Colorado.
Absolutely. Our
And-
favorite restaurant in Santa Fe, Geronimo, always has Colorado lamb on the menu, always.
And there are, Colorado especially has a lot of flocks that are, pretty much meat only. But a lot of farmers, and it's particularly true here in the Northeast, are dual purpose. So they have the sheep for both wool and meat, and also sheep's milk. But
Interesting. I don't think I've really seen much sheep in California. I wonder if they're more farther north.
in the Central Valley,
Okay.
in the Sierra foothills,
Mhm.
it's the #1 sheep state in the country.
Really? Wow. Well, I mean, it is a really big state, so.
And originally, the shepherds were Basque.
Oh,
No,
okay. Yeah. So
actually
they
have-
still have some Basque restaurants in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
Which I went to one a couple of years back, which was amazing. It was an incredibly bizarre eating experience, but it was delightful.
Family style?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
kind of-
they just have all these sort of weird side dishes that you kind of wouldn't think. I mean, I don't know, weird is exactly the word, but it's just, kind of a odd combination of, there's just sort of like, here's some spaghetti and here's some green beans. And then here's, they had this, it was pickled, I think it was pickled tongue. It was great.
Yeah, there were, when I
And,
had it,
kind of a lot of different stuff. And then they would have the sort of, each day of the week, the main dishes would change. And so it was, I think there was like a lamb stew and prime rib, which I've never really gotten the point of prime rib until I went to this place. It was incredible. So delicious. But yeah, and then there's just as much wine as you can drink, and you're just at a table with a bunch of strangers. And they have this strange sort of Basque cocktail that, the lady at the bar, I was like, well, do you guys have like a drink that you recommend or whatever? And she's like, well, we have this cocktail. Not everyone likes it, but I was like, yes, give me that. I want to taste the different thing. And it was actually really great. I forget, sorry, the name of the cocktail, but
yeah, but
it
when
was
you,
great. If you're ever going through Bakersfield, for sure.
I think I've been there. I've been to a bunch of Basque restaurants in California, different parts of the Central Valley, but when I was in college, but they had the lamb stew and the prime rib at the same time, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I survived that meal. So much food.
Different full-on meat courses in one meal. So
Yeah.
this is not Bilbao, or San Sebastian
No.
being of the Basque region today. This is really,
Yeah. Nothing is being put on your plate with tweezers at that place, let me tell you.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, it is ironic given that it's the food capital of the world in the original Basque country, but the California Basque and the Nevada and the Colorado Basques it's a much more rustic. They were guys that couldn't make a living in Spain or Basque country and immigrated to the U.S. and just kind of brought their very simple cooking with them. But it's a great experience. I love that food.
Yeah.
They're
so fun.
now having a really hard time getting any Basque shepherds because the economy there is so much better. So
Mm.
We still have some in Colorado. Actually, the whole sheep industry in Colorado was started by Basques, and they're still up. Families of them. I'll have to check to see if there's a restaurant up in northwestern Colorado, and particularly around the area of Meeker, Colorado. And last summer aside, every summer, Border Collie from all over the country come to the Meeker Classic, which is the premier Border Collie sheep herding competition.
and Kelly knows of Border Collies because she had one.
I do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I actually took her sheep herding. She was a failure because she didn't want to listen to me. She just wanted to do her own thing. But the woman whose farm, the trainer that we would go to, it was so fun at the time following her on Facebook, because February is lambing season, and so she'd have all these cute little lambs, and then
Oh.
bye they go to be processed. But it was fun while it lasted.
Have
Yeah.
either of you read this book? It's called 3 Bags Full, and it's a mystery novel, but it's so the shepherd gets killed, and the flock of sheep decide that they're going to try and solve the mystery. So it's all from the point of view of the sheep. It takes place in Ireland, I think, and it is a delightful book. It's translated from, I want to say the author is like Belgian or something like that. And I guess there's a series of them, but only one has been translated to English. But highly recommend this book, 3 Bags Full. It's really, really funny. And, you know, just great characterization of all of the different sheep and their view of what's going on in the village and how they're trying to understand what the humans are doing. And it's great.
It's cute.
To Ireland a couple years ago for a week, a cooking class at Malou for a week, and then before and after it, I went hiking in the they call it the Wild Western Way, or I think so, or Wild Atlantic Way, whatever. It's on the west coast, and when you go through these public trails, you're going through stiles, and you're basically going through sheep pastures. You can't have a dog with you because the dogs would bother the sheep.
Mhm.
And Ireland is like one gigantic sheep pasture. And it was interesting. I mean, ended up spending a lot of time with sheep, and they're cool animals. That was before I got into being involved with this wool and textile business that the lamb stands part of. But what that experience told me is what Connecticut looked like around the Revolution, because it was just one giant sheep pasture. All these stone walls in the woods were walls around sheep pastures, and so it's just they had cut down the wood to make houses and make fires, but also to feed iron furnaces. You imagine how much wood you would use if you were making iron from, well, you make charcoal and then you use the charcoal to make the iron with lime and all. But so at the time of the Revolution, there was hardly any trees. It was just one giant pasture from border to border. And if you got up at the high points, you would have been able to see forever. Now you can't see beyond the next tree, basically. It's all the trees have grown back, and it's dense. It's like a thicket, but
And not as many sheep.
not as many sheep, although we're going to try to change that. There's still, in a tiny state, size of San Diego County, we have
So crazy.
we have 400 sheep farms.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. They're all tiny, they're pretty small.
Yeah.
The other thing that's different, whereas in Colorado, almost all the sheep are one breed, Rambouillet, which is our version of Merino. Here we have 30 different breeds of sheep. And people think that all you can do with our medium and coarse wools is make blankets out of it. And, it does make good blankets, but you can make really, really good, fine luxury garments out of it, which we've proven that you can do. So, yeah, it's kind of an overlooked wool, and it's very durable. So I think it has, for certain uses, it's a better wool to use than merino. And people were saying, but how could you have a medium and coarse wool next to your skin? Well, we invented this really amazing breakthrough thing. It's called a lining. Been around for a while.
Yeah.
So,
So
but
these
the
sheep
Australians tried to convince everyone that the only wool you could wear is merino wool, and it's just not true. But our farmers make more money selling lamb than selling wool.
Oh, interesting.
So if you want to sustain the wool production and increase it, basically you got to get people to eat more lamb, because the two go together. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're really trying to reveal the wonderfulness of lamb, right? It's just an amazing meat. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
And I may have OD'd on it.
What's the problem?
A little break.
I've had lamb every day. I haven't had it for breakfast. Well, actually, that's not true. This morning I had a chorizo sausage for breakfast that was made from lamb. So
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
that's good. You could also do like a hash instead of corned beef or roast. You could use lamb.
Yeah, and I think I was telling you before, we made a lamb chilaquiles with kind of birria style lamb, which was really delicious, and that's a great breakfast food. So
yeah, well,
don't give up yet, Kip.
you know, there's one of the Zahav hummus things. He calls it Jerusalem hummus, and he admits maybe he just made that up, but it's a ground beef, seasoned ground beef over the hummus. So the hummus I make tomorrow, because I have some more of this, it's not a sausage, it's the ground beef as a whole, the ground lamb in the chorizo as a loose thing. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna put lamb chorizo over hummus. What do you think about that?
I like
That's pretty
it.
much what I've done. That's pretty much the lamb ragu that I made. So it'll be delicious.
Yeah, but
Sounds
you had
good.
what, onion and tomato in it too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, have some nice cheese on the side, like a feta type cheese, I think.
Oh, good. Well, I got some aged farmhouse cheese
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
yesterday at this winter market. It's a really amazing thing. They built this new facility for it, but on Saturdays, from like 9 to 1, they have I think from November through April, they have a winter market. But
That's
a
great.
lot of farmers are growing stuff in greenhouses and stuff. Once it gets to be temperate, then they don't try to compete with the local farm markets. But this is like the one big winter market during the winter, and it's just amazing. And just hundreds of people there. I've never seen a farm market that has as many people at it and has as many vendors. So it's really, really exciting. I bought too much stuff.
Of course.
So any kind of parting thoughts, Jenny?
Parting thoughts. I really want to explore this cookbook more. I thought it's really like the writing of the recipes, I thought is, it's very clear and straightforward. It's pretty simple. I mean, having written a cookbook, that's something I notice more than I used to. Just like the way that recipes are written, they don't, this is not like a Cook's Illustrated type recipe where they're like, you need, 1 7/8 teaspoons of whatever, it's a much looser kind of thing, but the recipes seem really simple and accessible. And yeah, I'm excited to look into the whole hummus situation more. It sounds
Oh
pretty
yeah, check that out.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth it. And make your own tahini, or tahina, as he says, the tahina sauce.
Right.
It's just the way Kelly talked about it, where you steep the blitz garlic in lemon juice and then strain it. And it's great. It's awesome. This, by the way, he recommends this in the book, but this is Soom. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, I've used that one before.
Their stuff is great.
Their
stuff is great.
It's awesomely good. I mean, all tahini will separate a little bit, but the stuff you often buy in the store, God knows how long it's been there. I mean, I'm sure this was made within the last month.
Wow.
So Soom actually is a woman-owned company. It's run by sisters, and they make a product that I will push. It's Soom chocolate tahini. You've never tasted anything so good in your life.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Actually, one of the Alon Shaya classes that Mike and I took was actually Italian. We made gnocchi and all this stuff. And for dessert was, and an ice cream sundae with this chocolate tahini sauce on it. We just had it with vanilla ice cream. Like literally you can eat it by the spoonful. It's so delicious.
Okay, I'm gonna get some of that.
That sounds dangerous, actually.
Yes, and I like my chocolate, but this stuff with the sesame, it's like this nutty, delicious, better than Nutella, sort of
Yeah.
delicious.
Yeah, I've made some like chocolate chip cookies that have tahini in them, and it's really surprisingly great.
Yep.
David Leibovitz, he's like cookbook author and food blogger and stuff. He on his website has a great recipe for that. If you look him up,
Delicious.
highly recommend.
So, so Kelly, any parting thoughts?
No, I mean, thank you for including me. This was a lot of fun. I've been cooking and serving lamb for a long time. As I mentioned earlier, my recipe is my go-to whenever I have company of new people, my friends' children or my children's friends. I'll ask them, what do you want me to make? And they always say that lamb Provençal dish that I got from Cuisine Rapide that was given to me 30 years ago by a friend. And it's the only recipe in that book that I have taken to heart and I've made it my own. And it's so simple and so great. So this was a fun way to explore all sorts of different lamb. And excited to do the shoulder when I have a little more time and more people to eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Recommend.
Want help, that's for sure. You're going to end up eating shoulder for a week.
Right.
Which is what I did. But yeah, no, lamb is awesome. Awesomely good. Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's fun.
Thank you.